when someone asks you, how do I get more followers? What do you tell them?
Honestly, the number one thing is to be active. There's so much going on social now, and it's so oversaturated, and there's so many messages, but the algorithm really does favor when people are actively engaging. So if you want people to come to you, you also kind of have to go to them.
Okay, so tell me about Something Social. What was the impetus to start this awesome agency, and like, how did you do it?
After I graduated, I had a friend of a friend who was hiring in social media, and at the time it was like, what does that mean? Like, what do you mean it's a social media agency? Once I started in the flow and the day-to-day of working in social for brands, I realized social media was really a blend of everything I loved. It was marketing and business development and storytelling and creative and visual and photography mixed with captions and copywriting and wittiness and just telling the story of these brands and seeing it actually make a difference in their brand awareness, in their sales, in their growth. And I just became very passionate about it. At the time, there was a spin studio I was obsessed with called Cycle House, and they asked me to do some consulting. They were like, we don't really know what to do with our social. Can you help us? Kind of on a whim, I was like, you know what? I'll start my own company and you guys could be my first client. And they were like, great, sounds good. Through word of mouth and referrals, it was early on. This was 2014. It just started to grow, and it was like, who's doing this account? This Instagram's really good. And, people would give them my name, and then we had 2 and 3 and 4 clients and 5, and I had to hire, and then it just kind of grew from there.
And how many clients do you have now?
Right now, I think active in terms of the day-to-day, probably around 30.
And speaking of taking on clients, what is that decision process for you? Like what do you look for someone who needs the most help? Do you look for, is it size? Like, are you working with clients of all sizes, or?
When we're looking at new business and taking on new opportunities, we want to believe in the brand. I think it's so important because the work that we do, it's not like a churn and burn, plug and play. It's very tailor-made. It's very specific to every brand. We want all of our clients to feel like we're in-house with them. Ultimately, with new brands, it's also ones that we think we can tell their story really well and that we feel strongly about.
You were kind of talking about the oversaturated market of social media, and arguably it is, but kind of rightfully so, because everyone does need it, right? So how do you make Something Social stand out?
It's really important to us that we are very tailor-made to every specific client. For us, and with Something Social, you could look at 10 of our accounts and you would have no idea that we ran all of them. And I want it to be that way because some are so bright and colorful and poppy, and some are really girly, and others are really dark and moody and edgy. And so while we might have like a brand look, because people always say like, oh, you have such an aesthetic. And yes, of course, we have our own brand aesthetic. But when it comes to the different clients that we work with, we want it to really speak to them and speak to their visuals and their story. So I think that's part of it. My team and company culture is super, super important. And, we do little things, and I think now we're recognized, like we take birthdays really seriously and we take team outings really seriously. From an outside looking in, you get the sense of, how close the team is and how well we all work together. And I think that is something that is pretty unique.
Something Social is comprised largely, if not totally, of women, which I think is really important, especially in this kind of climate of our social climate.
Yeah.
And I think it has a very powerful, when you're talking about a brand aesthetic, I think you have a very powerful feminist message, which is great. Can you talk to me a little bit? Is that all intentional?
I mean, the fact that we are all women is incredible. I love it. I think my team loves it. I think we all work really well together. And there's something really, magical about having a team of women that are creating everything that we're doing. I have a lot of very active, women who are doing things outside of the workplace too, in terms of, doing the different marches and speaking for different causes that they believe in. I think it's a great perk that wasn't necessarily intentional.
Yeah. How much of your day is spent, posting and doing the, content, and how much of it is, company culture and building that brand?
Yeah, that's been a really interesting balance for me to find. My day is definitely split between the client work, the business development, team management, new business, There's all sorts of fun stuff, but
no typical days.
Definitely not. There are no 2 days are the same.
I don't know of any other kind of marketing other than social anymore. I mean, who sends like a press release?
Right.
Do you know?
So interesting.
Where do you see kind of the future of marketing going, and where social media fits into that? Like,
first of all, I don't think social media is going anywhere. And I know it's an interesting time too with everything that's going on with Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg, and things are changing. If Instagram disappeared tomorrow, like what would our business be? You know?
Right.
It's like
devastating.
So that's been a really interesting thing for me to think about just right now. It's like super timely, and how we make sure that the product that we're offering or the service that we're offering isn't so dependent on, one type of thing. I think getting your audience involved in the brand storytelling is what is going to make a company successful. For every business and every brand, you really need to pay attention to what your audience is saying and figure out a way to take this army of basically brand ambassadors that are now built in for you and use them to, your advantage and use them to grow your business.